Achieving the true ending in a video game can be quite the struggle, as one fulfills different conditions and confronts tough challenges. But some endings just aren't worth the hassle, either ending the game in a less than fulfilling fashion, being outright depressing, or just a complete waste of time. Let's take a look at the 12 terrible endings that were also really tough to unlock. Spoilers follow, so be warned. As a series, Kingdom Hearts has had its fair share of cryptic secret endings that required an extraordinary amount of effort to unlock. Kingdom Hearts 3's Remind DLC is no different. In order to unlock the secret episode and receive the true ending, you had to defeat all 13 bosses in the Limit Cut. That means being level 99 with the best equipment and dealing with high damage unblockable attacks. Once that's done, you faced Yuzora from Virum Rex in a much tougher fight than anything before. Depending on whether you win or lose, the ending will be slightly different, but the scene with Yuzora waking from a dream while in a vehicle is a dead ringer for Final Fantasy Versus 13. How and why? No one but Nomura can answer that question. The core theme of Mafia III is not being consumed by revenge and becoming the evil that Lincoln had sworn he'd stop. So it makes sense for him to leave the criminal world and New Bordeaux, with the underboss who controls the most territory gaining control of the city. You could also rule together with them and expand the empire all along the way down south. But what if you decide to kill all of the underbosses and rule the city alone? Well, Lincoln will die from a car bomb which was planted by his adoptive uncle James. Upon seeing Lincoln's descent into madness, he decides to take matters into his own hands, though James is subsequently haunted for years by the thought of Lincoln coming back to take revenge. It's bad enough that Luigi, terrified of ghosts as he is, has to deal with a haunted mansion in order to save Mario. But at least there's a ton of treasure to collect, be it coins and gold bars, and depending on how much is collected, he'll receive a new house as a reward. What happens if you pick up the least amount of treasure, an incredibly difficult task since you have to actively go out of your way not to touch any? Well, you get a tent, as if the game is telling Luigi to take a hike for doing something so ridiculous. And who could blame it? Of course, Luigis Mansion isn't the first game to not reward you for doing something completely extraneous. In Wario Land Super Mario Land 3, not earning any coins bestows a birdhouse as Wario's final home, and once again, like any Mario title, earning very little to no coins at all can be very difficult, especially when you're trying to survive. Granted, it's not something you should be doing, but it's a bad ending all the same. Of all the games to have more than one ending, Streets of Rage is perhaps the one that you'd least expect. This so-called bad ending can only be unlocked in two-player mode, but it's not about just beating the game. When confronting Mr. X, the final boss, the players are asked whether they would join him. If one says yes and the other says no, then both players will fight each other. So now the survivor is on Mr. X's payroll, except they can alter their choice and fight him. Defeating him results in the player taking over Mr. X's criminal empire. The game tells you you're great for doing this, but once the credits roll, it makes sure to remind you that this is the bad ending. In any other title, completing extra missions and unlocking the routes would be necessary for the one true ending where everyone is happy. Not so in the case of Final Fantasy XIII 2. Throughout the game, you'll collect fragments which provide different lore entries, new skills, and different endings. There are 160 in total to collect, so obviously there's something exceptional for getting them all, right? Well, as it turns out, after collecting the fragments and watching all 8 of the Paradox endings, you unlock a 9th ending where the antagonist Caius claims victory. Atro is gone, as are the different timelines, and chaos is unleashed into the Grand Pulse as the world suffers with Nova Chrysalia. In short, chaos. In Mass Effect 3, having a low effective military strength meant screwing up a number of decisions and not having your galactic readiness full. The Legendary Edition did away with the galactic readiness requirement for multiplayer, but this time, decisions made throughout the entire trilogy would influence your final EMS score. So you have to carefully and meticulously make every terrible decision possible to get the worst ending. The result of all that hard work? You would only have the destroy and control endings to choose from, and the fallout is catastrophic, with squad mates dying to Harbinger to all of the relays exploding. There are plenty of games with choices and consequences, but few pull it off to such extremes as Undertale. Essentially, if you kill all the different monsters in the underground, including the nightmarish sands, the universe is destroyed to the extent that you can't even replay the game without giving your soul to Chara. To do this, however, the game is altered forever. Try another playthrough without killing anyone and the game reminds you of your horrible deeds. This is a terrible ending, make no mistake, but that's the point. It's meant to underscore just how horrible your actions were, all in the name of treating the world like it's just a senseless game of killing and leveling up. Throughout Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana, you can fulfill different tasks to build Adol's reputation. This includes completing quests, rescuing castaways, partaking in interception and suppression battles, and completing quests for different NPCs. Ignore all of this though, and you'll be treated to an ending where Dana, the other central character fighting against the Lacrimosa, is essentially forgotten. Everyone just ends up leaving the island in anticlimactic fashion. I'd say it's pretty well known by now that Shadow the Hedgehog isn't a good game at all. Even worse is that getting the true ending to this asinine game requires slogging through numerous paths to unlock 10 different endings, all for the sake of the last way. Your reward? A whole bunch of nonsensical lore that finally confirms, once and for all, that Shadow is the real Shadow and not an android or a clone. He then ventures to Ark and says goodbye forever, Shadow the Hedgehog, after discarding a photo of Maria and Gerald Robotnik, which isn't much of a goodbye at all since he appears in Sonic 06, which released a year later, and was even more horrid. Much is being made about Adele being the savior of humanity, but fulfill the right conditions, and he may just become its worst fiend. Essentially, he needs to have 99 felonies, one of them being an ally kill on Rosalind. Upon defeating Overlord Xenon, or rather the fake version, players must battle Rosalind or True Xenon, who is level 2000, so you'll need to do a fair bit of grinding just to become powerful enough to defeat her. Slaying True Xenon causes Adele to become possessed by its soul, and turning him into a terrible demon that slays Taro and Hanako, his siblings. Even more horrifying is that if you have the Japanese voiceovers enabled, Adele is implied to be devouring his siblings in the end credits. Middleearth Shadow of War deviates quite a bit from the original Lord of the Rings lore, and not for the better, to the point that you wonder how it could truly end. The answers lie in the Shadow Wars, a post-game slog which is more of a long-winded requirement to unlock the epilogue. Essentially, you need to go through 10 stages of defending different fortresses, requiring better orc followers and defenses in the process. Even with the closing of the in-game marketplace, this can get very tedious. But survive long enough and your reward is Talion turning into a Nazgul and hunting Frodo in the main series of books. But hey, at least he's freed when the One Ring is destroyed along with Sauron, so that's something.
And that about does it for this video. If you enjoyed what you watched and want to see more from Gaming Bolt, you can always hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon next to it. That way you will never miss any of our videos.